Have you ever mistaken kindness for weakness? Have you assumed that the person who remains silent has nothing left to say? That the one who forgives again and again will always stay? This is the illusion that destroys many relationships. An empath rarely fights for revenge. They fight for peace. But once that peace becomes impossible, they walk away, not with anger, but with absolute certainty. And when they do, what follows is something most people never expect. Today, we will explore why hurting an empath carries consequences that cannot be undone, and why the greatest loss often belongs to the one who caused the pain. Many people believe strength must be loud. They imagine confidence as the ability to dominate every conversation, to win every argument, or to make others fear them. Because of this misunderstanding, they often look at an empath and see someone easy to manipulate. They mistake gentleness for weakness. They mistake patience for passivity. They mistake compassion for a lack of courage. But this is one of the greatest illusions the human mind can create. A peaceful person is not peaceful because they are incapable of conflict. More often, they are peaceful because they understand the cost of unnecessary conflict. They have learned that every argument steals a little of your energy, every grudge burdens the heart, and every act of revenge leaves a mark on the one who carries it. So instead of reacting to every insult, they choose restraint. Instead of answering every attack, they choose silence. Instead of trying to prove themselves to everyone, they focus on protecting their inner balance. An empath lives this way naturally. They feel more than most people realize. They notice changes in your voice before you notice them yourself. They recognize pain hidden behind laughter. They sense discomfort behind forced smiles. While others listen only to words, an empath listens to emotions. This sensitivity is not a weakness. It demands enormous inner strength because feeling deeply is exhausting. To remain kind in a world where you constantly absorb the emotions of others requires discipline that few people truly understand. Unfortunately, there are those who see kindness as an opportunity. They believe that someone who forgives will always forgive. Someone who understands will always understand. Someone who gives will always keep giving. They slowly begin crossing boundaries, speaking with less respect, taking more than they offer, expecting patience without showing gratitude. They convince themselves that nothing will ever change because the empath has always remained calm. But calmness should never be confused with helplessness. Observe the mountain. It stands quietly through storms, wind, and rain. It does not shout to prove its strength. It does not compete with the trees surrounding it, yet no one doubts its power. The mountain remains still because it is secure in what it is. In much the same way, an empath often remains silent, not because they are afraid, but because they see no value in every battle presented to them. Silence is often mistaken as surrender. In reality, silence can be observation. While others speak endlessly, the empath is watching patterns. They remember how people behave when no one is looking. They notice whether apologies become actions or remain empty words. Every broken promise, every act of disrespect, every moment of selfishness is quietly remembered. They are not collecting reasons to hate you. They are collecting evidence of who you truly are. This is why those who exploit an empath are often shocked by the ending. They believed there would always be another chance. They believed forgiveness had no limit. They believed patience meant permanence. What they failed to understand is that every act of kindness also carries a boundary. Every compassionate heart eventually reaches a place where protecting itself becomes more important than saving someone who refuses to change. Real strength has never been the ability to overpower another person. Real strength is the ability to remain compassionate without becoming naive, to remain forgiving without abandoning self-respect, and to remain peaceful without allowing others to destroy your peace. Never mistake a quiet heart for a powerless one. Once you understand that kindness is not weakness, you begin to see another truth that is even more important. An empath does not reach their limit quickly. They endure far more than anyone around them ever realizes. What appears to others as effortless patience is often the result of countless internal battles that no one else can see. Most people reveal their frustration immediately. They raise their voice, complain, or distance themselves at the first sign of disappointment. An empath often does the opposite. They pause before reacting. They ask themselves whether they may have misunderstood the situation. They try to see life through the other person's eyes. They search for reasons instead of excuses, believing that pain often causes people to behave in harmful ways. This willingness to understand is beautiful, but it can also become dangerous when it causes someone to ignore repeated patterns of disrespect. An empath rarely gives up after the first mistake. They believe people can grow. They believe wounds can heal. They believe that honesty, patience, and compassion can awaken the goodness hidden inside another person. Because of this belief, they offer second chances, then a third, sometimes even more. Each time they hope that this will be the moment everything changes. What many fail to recognize is that every chance has a cost. Every broken promise leaves a small crack in trust. Every careless word settles quietly inside the heart. Every moment of being taken for granted adds another weight that must be carried. None of these moments seem large on their own, but over time they become like drops of water falling onto stone. A single drop changes nothing. Thousands of drops reshape the entire surface. The empath carries these moments silently, not because they have forgotten them, but because they continue hoping they will no longer happen. They convince themselves that today's disappointment will become tomorrow's lesson. They choose optimism over resentment, yet hope cannot erase reality. If actions remain the same, the heart slowly begins to understand what the mind has been trying to deny. There is another reason empaths stay longer than they should. Loyalty means everything to them. When they care for someone, they do not care halfway. They invest their attention, their energy, and often their own peace of mind. Walking away feels like abandoning something they once believed in. They remember the good moments, they remember the promises, they remember the potential they saw in the relationship. Because they value commitment, they continue carrying burdens that were never meant to be theirs. This is why outsiders often misunderstand them. Someone may ask, why didn't you leave sooner? But the answer is rarely simple. The empath was not blind. They were hopeful. They were trying to protect the relationship before protecting themselves. They believed that love supported by patience could overcome selfishness. Sometimes it can, but only when both people are willing to grow. The greatest warning signs are often invisible because empaths do not announce their suffering. They continue smiling while carrying disappointment. They continue helping while feeling exhausted. They continue encouraging others while quietly losing pieces of themselves. Their silence is mistaken for happiness when in truth it is often an act of endurance. They do not want to become another source of conflict, so they carry emotional burdens in private. But every heart has a limit, no matter how compassionate it is. There comes a moment when the empath no longer asks, how can I save this relationship? Instead, a different question begins to arise. How much of myself must I lose to keep it alive? That single question changes everything. It marks the beginning of a transformation that few people notice until it is already complete. The quietest suffering often leads to the most permanent goodbye. This is the moment that most people never see coming. They believe the greatest danger is an empath becoming angry. They fear emotional outbursts, harsh words, or dramatic confrontations. But anger is not the true ending. Anger still carries emotion. It still means a part of the heart is reaching out, hoping to be heard, hoping something can change. The real ending begins when that emotion quietly disappears. An empath rarely wakes up one morning and suddenly decides they no longer care. Emotional detachment is not a single decision. It is the result of countless moments in which their trust was ignored, their kindness was taken for granted, and their efforts were met with indifference. Every disappointment removes a small piece of emotional investment until one day there is simply nothing left to give. This is why the change seems so sudden to everyone else. The person who ignored their tears for months suddenly notices their silence. The one who dismissed every concern suddenly wonders why the conversations have stopped. They ask, what happened? Why are you so different? But nothing changed overnight. The transformation happened quietly while they were too distracted to notice. Every ignored conversation, every broken promise, every act of disrespect was slowly building toward this moment. There is a profound difference between someone who is trying to fix a relationship and someone who has accepted that it cannot be repaired. While an empath still explains their feelings, there is hope. While they continue asking for honesty, respect, and understanding, they are still fighting for the connection. Even tears can be a sign that love remains alive, because tears are proof that the heart still believes something precious is worth protecting. But when the explanation stops, something far more significant has happened. The empath has stopped expecting you to understand. This silence is not meant to punish anyone. It is not a strategy to create guilt or manipulate emotions. It is simply acceptance. They have realized that repeating the same truth to someone who refuses to hear it only creates more suffering. Wisdom teaches teaches that not every lesson can be forced upon another person. Some people only understand through consequences, and sometimes those consequences arrive in the form of absence. Many people mistake this calmness for another temporary phase. They believe, give it a few days and everything will return to normal. They rely on the familiar pattern where the empath eventually reaches out first, forgives once again, and restores the peace. But they fail to recognize that something inside has fundamentally changed. The need to be understood has been replaced by the desire to protect inner peace. This is why emotional detachment feels so different. There are no dramatic speeches, no desperate attempts to prove who was right or wrong, no endless arguments searching for validation. There is simply a quiet decision to stop investing energy where it is no longer valued. The same heart that once waited patiently for change now chooses to walk toward a healthier future. People often underestimate the power of this moment because they assume love alone can rebuild what has been broken, but love cannot survive where trust has completely collapsed. Trust is the soil in which love grows. Once that soil has been neglected for too long, planting new promises changes very little. Words that once would have brought hope now sound empty because actions have already revealed the deeper truth. And this is perhaps the hardest lesson to accept. An empath does not stop loving because they wanted to. They stop carrying the relationship because they finally realize they cannot carry it alone. No amount of compassion can replace another person's willingness to change. No amount of patience can build a bridge if only one person continues laying the stones. When an empath lets go, they are not choosing distance over love. They are choosing truth over illusion. They understand that holding on to what continually harms them is not kindness. It is self-abandonment. The compassion they once poured endlessly into someone else finally begins flowing back toward themselves. By the time an empath becomes silent, the goodbye has already begun. Only after the silence settles do many people begin to recognize what they have truly lost. It is one of the most common patterns in human nature. We become familiar with what is consistently present, and familiarity often blinds us to value. We assume that what has always been there will always remain there. The sunrise comes every morning, yet few people stop to appreciate it until the day clouds hide its light. In the same way, the quiet presence of an empath is often overlooked until it is gone. When an empath is part of your life, they offer countless gifts that rarely announce themselves. They remember the small details others forget. They notice when your smile is forced. They encourage you when you doubt yourself. They celebrate your victories without envy and sit beside you during your failures without judgment. They create emotional safety, not through grand gestures, but through consistent care. Because these acts are so natural to them, others begin to see them as ordinary, but they were never ordinary. The greatest treasures in life are often the ones that ask for no recognition. Clean air is ignored until breathing becomes difficult. Good health is taken for granted until illness arrives. Genuine loyalty is rarely appreciated until betrayal teaches its value. The same is true for an empath. Their steady kindness becomes invisible because it is constant. Only when that kindness disappears does its true importance become impossible to ignore. Many people imagine they can easily replace someone who has walked away. They tell themselves there will always be another relationship, another friend, another companion. But they fail to understand that human beings are not interchangeable. Every sincere heart carries a unique way of loving, listening, and supporting others. An empath does not simply fill a role in your life. They create an atmosphere that cannot be copied. This realization often arrives too late. The house becomes quieter, conversations become shallower. Difficult moments feel heavier because the person who once carried emotional burdens alongside you is no longer there. The encouragement you once received so freely suddenly disappears. You begin searching for the comfort that used to surround you, only to discover that it was never guaranteed. It was a gift, and gifts should never be mistaken for obligations. This is where regret quietly enters. Regret is different from sadness. Sadness mourns what has been lost. Regret mourns what could have been protected. It whispers painful questions into the mind. Why didn't I listen? Why didn't I appreciate them when they were standing beside me? Why did I believe they would always stay? These questions have no easy answers because the opportunity to respond existed long before the questions appeared. Some people believe that an apology can erase everything. They think that once they finally recognize their mistakes, the relationship will simply return to what it once was. But trust is unlike a switch that can be turned on and off. It is built slowly through consistent actions and weakened slowly through repeated disappointments. Once it has completely collapsed, rebuilding it requires more than sincere words. And sometimes the person who was hurt has already found peace beyond the relationship. This is not because the empath has become cold or unforgiving. It is because they have finally learned the value of their own heart. They understand that returning to the same environment without genuine change would only reopen wounds that took tremendous courage to heal. Wisdom does not ignore the past, it learns from it. There is a lesson hidden within every loss. Comfort often teaches us very little because it asks nothing of us. Loss, however, forces us to examine our actions. It reveals the habits we ignored, the words we failed to speak, and the gratitude we postponed until tomorrow. Many people only learn the value of kindness after they have pushed it away with their own hands. Respect should never begin after someone has already walked away. That is why the deepest regret is not losing an empath. It is realizing their worth only after they are gone. Yet this story is not only about the one who is left behind. It is also about the one who finally chooses to leave. From the outside, it may seem as though the empath has simply walked away from a difficult relationship. But beneath that quiet decision, something much greater is taking place. A transformation begins, one that has been waiting beneath years of patience, sacrifice, and emotional exhaustion. For a long time, the empath measured their worth by how much they could give. They believed that if they loved a little more, understood a little deeper, forgave a little longer, things would eventually improve. They carried responsibilities that did not belong to them. They tried to heal wounds they did not create. They blamed themselves for problems that required two people to solve. This is the burden many compassionate souls unknowingly carry. They confuse love with endless self-sacrifice. But pain has a remarkable way of becoming a teacher when we are willing to listen. There comes a moment when the empath begins asking different questions. Instead of wondering, how can I make this person love me better? They begin asking, why have I been abandoning myself to earn what should have been freely given? That single shift changes the direction of their life. Their attention slowly moves away from changing others and toward understanding themselves. For the first time in a long while, they begin to notice their own exhaustion. They realize how often they ignored their intuition. They remember the moments when their inner voice whispered, this is not healthy. Yet they stayed because hope spoke louder than wisdom. Now those whispers become impossible to ignore.